Okay, so once again, good morning and welcome to Shuri Castle in Okinawa, Japan. We're only about 2 minutes from our tour start time. So let me give you a little bit of background to who we are and where we are. So my name's James and Becca's behind the camera. You'll probably see her later on. We're based here in Naha, Okinawa, which is the capital of Okinawa today. What we're going to take you around today is Shuri Castle, and Shuri is the old capital. From the time when Okinawa was an independent kingdom and before it was annexed and became part of Japan. Shuri Castle is the only reconstructed castle in Okinawa, and in fact has been destroyed and rebuilt 5 times. Right now, actually, the castle is under reconstruction again since a devastating fire that happened back in 2019, almost exactly 2 years ago now, and we will take a look inside at the reconstruction work and take you around how that's progressing as well in the second part of the tour. So just to give you a little bit more of intro on myself and Becca, we're both from the UK. We both came to Okinawa to pursue karate practice, and I've been here for over 10 years and Becca for about half that time. We actually run a karate dojo called the Sato Dojo. If you can find our channel later online on YouTube, we post a lot of videos there, some to do with karate and some to do with tours around the island. So hopefully you'll find something useful and enjoyable there. Feel free to subscribe and follow what we do. Okay, so let's begin our tour. So we talked about Shuri as being the old capital of the Ryukyu Kingdom. So the Ryukyu Kingdom was an independent island monarchy that reigned for around 500 years prior to Okinawa being annexed into Japan. During that time, it became a very, very prosperous nation, located as it is geographically right in between Japan, China, and Southeast Asia. So Ryukyu was a trade hub, from very, very early on, the Chinese dynasty of the time sought to establish control of Okinawa as an important trading location and trading hub. And really it was the establishment of that relationship between the Empire China and what became the ruling class in Okinawa that resulted in Shuri being lifted up and promoted and becoming the capital of this island nation. There are several different gates and entrances into the main castle complex. We are on the north side at the moment. Before we go inside, we're going to take you around some of the gardens and the areas just outside. Because Shuri wasn't only the political capital, it was also the cultural and religious capital of the Ryukyu Kingdom. So for example, down here we have a gate to what was a Buddhist temple. There was a Zen Buddhist temple here. This is in fact was a model closely on one of the most significant Zen Buddhist temples in Kyoto. And if we go down and take a close look, the temple was called Enkakuji, and you can see the stone there on the left. And although today nothing remains of the temple buildings, what was reconstructed was the gates, the main entrance that we're looking at now, and behind that, part of the ceremonial gardens, there is a water garden there and a bridge. Unfortunately, pretty much all of the temples and the main area of the castle was destroyed at various points in history. But this reconstruction was done within the last few decades. And today, this site, the remains of Enkakuji Temple, are one of the most significant archaeological and historical sites located around the perimeter of the castle. In its heyday, Shuri would have been surrounded by these kind of temples and religious sites. Buddhist, Confucian, also the Okinawans have their own indigenous belief system, more like animism, where they venerate their ancestor spirits, but also kind of the spirits of nature as well. So today Okinawa has a real mix of, let's say, religious and cultural belief, kind of all overlaid on top of each other, which makes it a really, really interesting culture to observe. Okay, let's turn around and go over to another beautiful feature.
There's lots of people on trips today, and the reason for that is the Shuri Matsuri is happening, so you might get to see that, which is another bonus.
So the castle site is surrounded by ornamental gardens, lakes, and other features designed to kind of impress the majesty of and the high level of sort of civilization and culture of the Ryukyu king and the dynasty that was based here in Shuri. So this is an artificial pond or a lake with a pavilion in the middle, as you can see, with access via a Chinese-style bridge. This was actually constructed as a place for visiting VIPs to relax and to enjoy demonstrations of dance or martial arts or other performances there in the front of the pavilion. Today, this water feature actually also has an important function of helping to control the rainwater in the river that flows down through from the top of the site right down. In fact, goes all the way down to the coast from here. So there are a series of ponds and dams. One of the reasons that Shuri Castle was a very important castle site was that it has a very, very good water supply. And we'll look at one of those natural springs later on as we go up to the entrance of the castle. But this is one of the quieter edges of the castle park. We'll go down here and see the ducks. They're a favorite. So the ducks here are very, very friendly. Very, very friendly. They get nice and close.
I almost stepped on this duck.
Expecting to be fed, I think.
They're Muscovy ducks. They're actually from South America, apparently. So I'm not exactly sure how they've ended up a lot of ducks here. There's also usually a heron that lives around here, a really beautiful one. I'm not sure where he is right now. There he is. You can see him over there, catching his breakfast on the other side of the pond.
So in the old days, there would be sort of pleasure boats, that would be ponted up and down the pond here, and also the lake that's down here and the next level below. So you can just kind of imagine, you know, VIPs from China and from the Ryukyu kingdom and other partner kingdoms too, Southeast Asia, Japan, enjoying a leisurely float around, ponds around these lakes. Actually, there's a big old turtle down there.
Oh. See if you guys can spot the turtle. So the other really interesting thing that's next to where we're at is the army headquarters from World War II. So we'll go and have a look. We can't get too close to them or everything all cuts off. So
so Shuri Castle has, you know, a history, 500-year long or more history of being occupied as sort of a center of rule and center of operations. One of the more tragic episodes was the Battle of Okinawa in 1945, when Japanese forces were holed up in the bunkers and the tunnels that they dug underneath the Shuri Castle mountain. In fact, the Japanese army had been burying and building tunnels, bunkers since the 19th century here at Shuri, And in the World War II, they really took advantage of that and dug in deep. Unfortunately, it was from the start destined to be a battle that they would lose against the Allied forces, and many people actually perished inside these tunnels and bunkers, which still riddle the Shuri Hill here. You can get access today. They closed it all off. I think a lot of it has been left pretty much as it was since the war. But here's a panel in front of one of the main entrances here. It gives us a little bit of history about the 32nd Army, Japanese army, which was tasked with defending Shuri from the Allied invasion. This wasn't the last location to give out, but it was the last major HQ. After Shuri had been taken, and it took weeks and weeks of vicious, ferocious battle with many losses on both sides for the Americans to take control of Shuri. The last holdout for the remaining Japanese forces was down on the south coast, and that site today is memorialized as a large peace park, a memorial down there to not just to the military that were lost there, but the many civilians. The Okinawans estimated that a third of the population was lost during the battle for Okinawa. 400,000 people. So it was really a very tragic episode in the history of Okinawa.
Basically, it's still everywhere you go, there is something, because the island is so small, and I guess the whole island was involved in the war, and so everywhere you go, there is a little reminder of some sort about World War II. We have a question asking if there's still boats now. There's not boats. You can't go play on the boats. It'd be really good if there was, but there's not.
It would be good if they brought them back, but I've never seen them. No, not yet. Maybe that would be a suggestion to send to the Shuri Castle, to the tourist authority or something. It would be nice to have those back.
But then I always wonder, like, it wouldn't always be deep enough because it's kind of on the rain, right?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it does get very shallow. Maybe we could get those boats that look a bit like ducks. That would be good fun.
The ones you pedal with your feet.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're heading up back towards the center of the castle. We're actually outside of 3 enclosures which form the main site. And what's interesting here is you get to see close up the very distinctive masonry, the techniques that were used to build these castles. In fact, it changed over time, and there were at least 3 different major sort of periods or styles of building here. What you're looking at in front here is what they call the turtle shell. Is this turtle shell?
Yeah.
This is the turtle shell style where rocks are roughly formed to fit together, but essentially they're still using kind of the natural shape of the stones. But the walls are always at an angle, which optimizes them to be durable during earthquakes. Later on, the building technique evolved into more of a square cut stones, which you can see up on the tower there.
And then as we get further back, you can see the original ruins. But we're going to go this way first. We're going to have a look at the World Heritage gate that we have here. School trips are all coming back from the mainland now.
So this is getting a little bit busier here now. I'm going to put my mask on. Hopefully that won't muffle the audio too much for you.
Did you know that yesterday, though, there was apparently only 1 confirmed case of COVID?
Oh, that's good news. Yeah. The numbers are definitely going in the right direction, Okinawa. Okay, so we're just walking past one of the very significant cultural sites, religious sites here in the Shuri grounds. This is a gate, and it's called the Sonohyan Utaki Ishimon, or the Sacred Stone Gate. This was built by one of the Ryukyu kings as a place. It was the entrance to a garden area, but also a place where you come and pray for good fortune on journeys. The path that we've just taken is one of the major paths out of the castle down to the port, and from there on across to China, across to Japan, Southeast Asia, wherever. And many of the Shuri nobles would be sent to China to receive a Chinese classical education. Really, just sort of the top rank of the royal family and aristocracy. Even today, people will stop at this gate, make a little prayer for good fortune for somebody that's traveling. There's nobody here right now, but many times that we've been here, we've seen people just making a little offering and offering a few prayers here. So this gate has also been recognized as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. And in fact, there are a number of sites around Shuri which have been given the same recognition.
So let's have a bit of a closer or further look at it, so you can see it's really quite big, this gate, and it would have led down into the pond area where the boats are, and into the forest down there where the king could have hosted his envoys and had the parties. And you can see that lots of people are liking this gate. Lots and lots of people, lots of pictures of this one.
Okay. And just next to this is actually one of the most iconic sites within the Shuri Castle grounds.
Okay.
In fact, this symbol has almost become sort of a symbol of Okinawa in itself. This is called the Shuremon. We're actually approaching the back of the gate. We're going to walk through, turn around and show you the front. You probably see the big school group or university group behind taking their pictures in front of it. It's a very, very popular location for that. This is one of 14 gates which used to lead from the port up to the castle. This is the only one that's been fully reconstructed.
That's a nice sign.
Here's a good sign. Very relevant for us because we are karate people too. The birthplace of karate, Okinawa, Japan. Okinawa Hassho no Chi, Okinawa. Oh, Karate Hassho no Chi, Okinawa. So we just had Karate Day in Okinawa. October the 25th is officially Karate Day in Okinawa, celebrated every year. And we just had almost a week of different events happening that were celebrations of that. This is our friend Andrea, good friend of ours, who also works within the karate promotion department here in Okinawa. And you can see that this is a celebration of Okinawa's sort of most successful karate competitor, having won gold at the Olympics recently. Okay, so
it's going to be loud for a minute.
It's going to be a little bit loud. We're surrounded by the guys, so we're going to go through quickly. This is the Shuremon. Get a good view of that. This is translated as the Gate of Proprietary. So each of the gates conveyed a message of sort of civilized values and sort of the high level of culture and majesty that the Okinawan or the Ryukyu dynasty wants to convey to its visitors, but also to reinforce its connection with a very close connection, special connection with the Chinese Empire. Hence the Chinese style of architecture as well, of course. You can imagine this was the final gate before you actually got into the castle. And you'd probably come up on horse or walked for 2 or 3 kilometers from the port through a series of these gates before you arrived at the castle. Okay, so let's head back in, or else we're going to get overtaken by this large group behind us.
You can see just how decorative and ornamental it is when we get a little bit closer up. Usually the round red tiles that you see would have the family crest on it, so you can see which family house it is or where you are in that thing. And then if you look up here, you can just see how sort of Chinese orientated and inspired the design is.
And you can see the gate has actually 3 sort of
you're not supposed to walk through
it.
The middle.
And your rank on your role would determine which of those entrances you came through.
Yeah, I think only the king was allowed to go in the middle one, right?
I think so, yeah.
Well, never mind. So this actually here I was reading about, which was really interesting, and we haven't really stopped at these before. These are the original slab tablets that actually taught people a lot about the history of the Shuri Castle and how many times it had burnt down and how many fights and how the kings had succeeded each other. There's 2 of them that they've managed to save throughout throughout the war. I read somewhere that in the war, they were taken away from Shuri Castle and away from the tunnels, and they were stored either in like a temple or a shrine, or the house of a temple or a shrine.
Yes.
Person. So there's this one, and it's got tiny writing on. They won't let us get close to them, and I'm not even sure if this is the real one. But with the two of them together, I guess it could give a brief history of Shuri.
It's very important point to note that during the Second World War there was so much devastation that, and then theft and looting by the invading forces of anything they could find of value when they got here, that anything of value that survived had been hidden away, well hidden away, usually in caves, because the whole southern part, and certainly this whole area, Shuri and the Naha, it was completely devastated by the bombing and the devastation, and by the war. Almost nothing survived. So families lost all of their documents, lost all of their possessions, and literally the only things that survived were things that were shipped away off the island, taken away up north, for example, or that were hidden away in caves and weren't discovered. So.
And actually, there's stories about lots of things that were actually taken by American forces, and then at some point was given back. But you know, the original crown has disappeared forever.
Yes.
Of the king.
Yes. Yes. Some very valuable items disappeared for good. But
we can see the reconstruction of the big bell when we get to the top. But
absolutely.
While we are here, we should probably tell you about Commodore Perry while we're talking about Americans.
Yes, this is a good spot to stop. And actually, while I tell you a little bit about how Commodore Perry arrived here, we'll see if we can pick up one or two questions if you have any as well. So this is the Kankaimon, which means the gate of welcome. This is the first sort of secured gate that you get to when you're coming up to the castle. And in 1853, Commodore Perry, who had been dispatched from America in a fleet of black ships, these were literally gunships, and he was sent to conduct gunship diplomacy in order to open up Japan to foreign trade, especially with the United States. They were looking for a preferential relationship there. The Japanese had told them no. Japan was still in the period of sakoku, or closed country, that had been for centuries under the Tokugawa regime. Perry stopped here first before proceeding up to Yokohama and the mainland. And this was sort of a test run to see if he could, push his way into diplomatic relations. And he actually managed to get into the castle twice. He didn't get to meet the king, but he was given a banquet, a dinner, and sort of an audience. The story is that he arrived at the port, proceeded up with a grand procession of a marching band, marines, even a cannon, dragged all that up to here, and then proceeded to negotiate quite vigorously with the officials who'd be peering over the top of this gated entrance. Like I say, he eventually made his way in, and that was really the beginning of the opening of Japan, the Meiji Revolution, which led to the rapid industrialization of Japan. Some say the westernization, but only in certain aspects. Japan remained a very, retained very much its character. But what it did do was, go through this revolution of rapid industrialization and taking on sort of the best of the elements of Western culture that it could find. If we go and have a closer look at the gate, you will be able to see some shisa.
Right, before we do that, we can look at, there's the Matsuri today. So we might actually get to see a reenactment of the king and the queen.
That would be very cool.
Whatever else they have going on in here. So
yes, excellent timing today.
We have the shisas on either side here. It's great. It's got very quiet quickly, which is nice. You can see there is two shisas. One has got his mouth open and the other has got his mouth closed. They say that one of them will keep in your good spirits and keep out the bad spirits, and they're kind of seen as a bit of a lucky charm, talisman kind of thing to have.
So bear in mind that all that you see today has been reconstructed in modern times, including many of the shisa and things. But these are modeled on older shisa, older models. The shisa has been sort of an icon in Okinawa since
15th century.
Since the 15th century.
When it was brought over here from China.
So today you'll see shisa everywhere.
Yeah.
They're actually one of the most popular things to buy as a souvenir and take home. Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
ごめん、今ライブ中です。すみません。
So we're gonna head through. We've just gone through the gate, and now we've got about another 3 gates still to get through before we get to the main middle of the castle, where you would see the main part. We got somebody that says so it convinced him that gunboat diplomacy works.
Yeah, that pretty much established the precedent for gunboat diplomacy. Yeah.
It's just scarily similar to how some of the world still behaves today, is how it was then. So you can see right before we're near the what's this?
This is the Zuisenmon.
Zuisenmon. We have down here.
So Okinawa, the geology of Okinawa is basically limestone, extremely porous, with lots and lots of natural caves, tunnels, and aquifers, and very, 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 very clean water. Shuri water is renowned for its quality. In fact, one of the major industries that the king controlled, which was located right next to the castle, was sake production, rice wine production. Here in Okinawa, that's called awamori, and awamori actually became a major cash cow, a major export from Okinawa to China, to Japan. The Okinawans, though, had learned it from Siamese, what is today Thailand. And in fact, even today, they continue to make most awamori from rice that is imported from Thailand.
Yep, and it's Shuri is kind of still today the rich part of the city and the place to live, and things that are produced in Shuri are seen as, I guess, more premium of a product.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because they can use the king and the castle as a nice selling point there.
Exactly. The legacy of the Ryukyu kingdom is very much alive today in terms of many Okinawans look back to the Ryukyu Jidai, the Ryukyu period, as sort of a golden age of Okinawan history. And it was in many ways.
They've actually just finished repainting this gate here, so you can see the beautiful red that they have.
Yes, this is lacquer. This is lacquer on wood here, which makes it very waterproof and very durable.
And they're just repainting and reconstructing this gate that we see here. And this is the gate with the water clock, right?
Yes, the water clock and the sundial here, yes.
And this is also the gate where you must get off of your horse to go through it.
Yes, we're getting close to the inner enclosure where the king's palace was located. And so, yes, at this point, regardless of rank, you would have to dismount from your horse or from your palanquin, from your carrying chair, and proceed on foot. You'll notice that the steps here are all built with a slope downwards. You can see that it makes it a little bit harder to sort of climb up. And the reason for this is that to kind of impress people on let's say the majesty and the importance of the person that they're going to have an audience with, the Ryukyu king.
Would the king also have to get off? Or does he come in somewhere else?
I think the king had a special privilege. He would come in somewhere else. Okay, so we've already climbed up quite a bit here. Let's take a look at the view. We've got a great view here. Today the weather is very clear, which is a bonus. But here we are. We're on the north side of the castle. We're here, essentially, we're looking across the west coast with the ports down there, but also basically looking up sort of the north, to the north end of the island. The island basically runs from north to south. It's kind of long and thin. And in the old days, obviously, there'd be far fewer buildings and urbanization. And other castle sites would have signal fires on them. And so if there were ships arriving from the north, then they would light the fire and down through the chain of locations on the island to signal down to Shuri that someone was coming. The island's about 120 kilometers long.
Yeah, 66 miles long and about 7 miles wide, so it's still really quite small.
There are many points in the island where you can stand on a ridge and see both the east and west coasts.
This is the most populated area. Naha has about 400,000 people, 400,000 residents in the whole of the city. And considering there's about 1.3 to 1.4 million people living in Okinawa as a whole, you have really everybody is concentrated here.
Yeah, the south of the island is heavily populated. The center of the island has a lot of the military bases on it, US military bases, and there are a lot. The north is still less, it still has a lot of jungle, a lot of mountains. And so, but it's all easy to get to. Most people will hire a car to drive around, and the whole island is very easily accessible that way. So that's a recommendation if you ever come here.
So we're going to take a look at the bell, because this is one of the items that was actually the original is in America, no? But they gave it back. Well, basically it was stolen after the war by some of the US military, just like lots and lots of the things from the castle and Okinawa in general was.
Yeah, so this is the Bridge of Nations bell. And it was originally cast in bronze in 1458 and hung in the Seiden, which is the center building of the castle, the one that was actually burned down recently. And it was inscribed with, "Located between Korea, China, and Japan, the Kingdom of Ryukyu is a beautiful nation in the southern seas. With its ships, the kingdom serves as a bridge between nations, and thus abounds with exotic products and treasures." So clearly, built or made in celebration of the wealth and the special position of Okinawa in between its larger neighbors.
Yeah, and the original was taken in the war by some Americans, but then it was found recently, and apparently it's been given back. But obviously they're not going to put the original sort of, right here. So
yeah, they'll keep that in a museum, well protected. Okay. So we are about to go through the next gate, which will take us. This is the York Gate, and this will take us into the outer courtyard. And there's quite a few interesting things to see in the outer courtyard. So let's go on through.
oh, you can see where you have to get off your horses.
Okay. So here we have the kind of carrying chairs or palanquins that royalty would have been carried around in the old days. Extremely ornate, golden dragons and tassels all over them.
Yeah, and these are never usually here, ever.
Yes, we're quite lucky to see
Very
these today.
special. Wow. See how many dragons there are and everything.
Here we go. And if, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Chinese characters. You can see here the characters for the king and queen. Kokuo, an old.
They probably at least like use some pillows or something in there.
You think they might just slide off as well? They're very shiny, aren't they? Lacquer. Everything's covered in lacquer. They probably had to hold on quite tightly to stop.
Or
them
the
sliding
people
off.
just have to learn to walk really well.
So just behind us is the tea house, this is, even today, when you visit here, you can come in and have a relaxing cup of Okinawan style tea. It's a little bit different from mainland tea, a little bit different from Chinese tea. They tend to whip it up into a froth It's called Buka Buka Ja. So you can have tea and you can have traditional sweets here. We come over and have a look. The panel here. I wonder if any of these sweets are familiar to you guys. I mean, obviously, a lot of these recipes and sweets came with Chinese culture to Okinawa. Perhaps they are found in Singapore too. I actually have a personal connection to these sweets because my wife, who is Okinawan, her family business is making traditional sweets, and now is the only store in Okinawa that still makes these two varieties of sweets. One is made from oranges and citrus; it's almost like a fruit dough, and the other is made from togan, tonggua in Chinese. You know, the big green vegetable melons, which is caramelized and turned into a very, very sweet sweet. So yeah, when you come to Okinawa, you can enjoy these kind of sweets. The reason these are associated with Shuri is because these were the kind of sweets that were served as delicacies at banquets for visiting VIPs, particularly ambassadors coming from China and other countries.
Is it true that there are some difficulty in rebuilding Shurijo regarding the loss of some of the methods for building the roof tiles?
I haven't heard about problems with the roof tiles. What I did hear about is challenges in finding the timber required. But I also heard that Taiwan had generously offered to supply the very, very large timbers that are required for the reconstruction of the Seiden. The Seiden is located just in behind this entrance gate here. The Seiden is, when constructed, is the largest timber construction on the island, and it requires very, very large timbers, essentially. Those couldn't be found in Okinawa anymore, but hopefully, yeah, they'll be sending them from Taiwan. I hadn't heard about tiles though. The tiles are something that tends to be made quite regularly in Okinawa anyway, so those are probably okay.
Oh, they said, I figured because of the wear of the bands from the 2019 fire. I think if they're trying to keep using some of the original parts,
right,
then yes, there's a problem with that.
Yes, they managed to recover some of the tiles, but many were lost in the fire. Actually, when we go inside, you might see that they still have them stacked up. They used to have them all stacked up on the side there, and you can see the ones that they recovered. And actually, they're a great host of volunteers, local volunteers that came in and cleaned them off, cleaned the fire damage off the tiles in order for them to be reused. If we come over here, we can actually see one of the or two of the things that sort of survived. Well, actually, these have been reconstructed. They partially survived. So these were dragon pillars that sat just in front of the Seiden, or the main palace building. There's two, one here and one to the back. You can see that they've sort of been reconstructed. The parts have been put back together. I seem to remember that they were a bit more damaged than this straight after the fire, but it looks like they've been putting them back together.
You can see he's got a big old break in him right here, but right from after the fire, they were really delicately kind of removed, and they've tried really hard to save the dragons, I guess. You can see they put a video up here of some of the ways that they're trying to fix the dragons.
Okay,
All right, so we're just about to get some tickets and head inside and through these gates. Before we do that, we can just stop here and have a look at this Sumui Utaki here, which is another name. Suimui is another name for Shuri Castle, and Utaki means worship site. According to the Ryukyuan mythology, Suimui Utaki is a sacred site created by the hands of God, and thus one of the highest standards in Shurijo Castle. The 10 sites of worship once within the castle were collectively called Tootake. Before leaving the castle to visit temples and shrines, the kings prayed at the Sumui-Otaki, and the priestesses performed a variety of rituals. Inside the stone hedges are banyan and kurotsugu trees. Okay, so inside here it's very spiritual, very sacred. You can see there's kind of dragon fish designs on the edges of the gate up here. Actually gives a really nice bit of shade while we're waiting for to go in. And you can see if we switch back this way, this is one of my favorite views because it's just sort of, you get a really, really beautiful, spectacular view. And everybody who sees this tells me it looks like the Forbidden City, but I've never been there. So I kind of stand here and think about that's what it might look like.
Okay, so let's make our way into the reconstruction zone. We're going into the Una, which is the inner courtyard area. And this was where it happened on October the 31st, 2019. Hi, onegaishimasu. Okay. Right. ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございます。Ooh, it's changing all the time.
Yes, yes, they've moved a lot around since even the last time we were here, which was just a few weeks ago. In the center courtyard here, they used to have all the tiles piled up, lots of bags of rubble and bits that they had salvaged. They've moved most of that out of the way now, and you can get a much clearer view of this inner courtyard.
Oh.
Right in front of us, where you see the low kind of building there, was where the palace stood.
It's quite sad, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And the dragon pillars that we just saw sat just there to the left and right of the steps, just in front of the palace. To the left was the building called the Hokuden, which was a building within which Chinese emissaries would reside while they were visiting Shuri Castle. And over on the right here, it's been completely replaced now with this ramp to give access to the site for construction. But where that ramp is used to be a building called the Nanden. And the Nanden was where the Japanese samurai, principally from the Satsuma clan, who had invaded Okinawa in 1609 and conquered the place, they used to reside there. It was an interesting situation because although the Satsuma clan came in and militarily conquered Okinawa, they allowed the Ryukyu monarch to continue to reign in order to maintain their trade relationships with China, because they wanted to benefit from the wealth that was flowing through the island. And so for several centuries, there was this delicate balance of political power between these sort of three parties, the Japanese Empire, the Okinawans, and the Chinese. We're going to make our way around the site.
That's new for us too, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, this is cool. You can see here exactly what we would have been looking at.
Yeah, if you kind of stand here, you can they sort of try to give you an overlay here of what the view was. Yeah. Yeah. You can see the Seiden and to the left the Hokuden. Pictures of the Seiden and the Hokuden. So they've definitely gone a lot further here than all of these panels here, depicting the reconstruction process are new. These have only gone up in the last few weeks, I think. The reconstruction project is scheduled to go on until 2026. They have mostly cleared the site now, I think, ready for reconstruction. It looks like that. So we should start to see actual buildings go back up now. What's interesting is that the Seiden, the central palace, will be reconstructed with traditional methods as a timber building. But the Hokuden and Nanden, as they were before, are really just sort of being built based on a facade. So not fully built with traditional methods, but built to look like the traditional building.
Wow, and you wouldn't have usually got such a spectacular view that we would get up here.
We're really getting up to a great point here.
And look, they've drawn the king as well. Isn't that cool? That's a really, really cool painting right here.
So what's kind of interesting is that in the Yuku monarchy, hats and colors were used to designate rank. Yeah. So you see the king has this gold hat with a special design that only he would wear. And then other ranks would have different colors going down literally through the hierarchy and pecking order. Also, the colors that they're allowed to wear in their kimono was also preset, their sashes, their kimonos, their hats. So it was a very closely regulated hierarchy within the monarchy system.
Yeah, and it's also interesting. We were taught by a sensei about why the lines are in the exact angles that they are in, and it's so apparently people can hear the king better when they're listening to him and his speeches. And if we just spin around, we have a real life person dressed in the outfit.
Good job. Okay. So there's an explanation board here of the stages of reconstruction. 2021. We're here,
They're
right?
going
So they're building the timber warehouse in order to store the timber for the rebuilding of the Seiden. Next year, they'll be building a temporary roof to cover the site of reconstruction of the Seiden, and then by 2026, the Seiden should be back.
We again have a really, really beautiful viewpoint from up here. Let's just have a quick look at that. So this is really interesting here. They've put up new here. It says in the days of the Ryukyu kingdom, if you were to look down on the streets of Shuri, the royal capital, from Shuri Castle, you would have seen many residences belonging to royalty and the warrior class lined up along cobblestone streets like a grid. Unfortunately, these residences were lost during the Battle of Okinawa, but the intricate lanes that connect the streets of Shuri are almost the same today as they were on the map 3 centuries ago. These Shuri streets, containing vestiges of a bygone era, allow us to imagine how the area would have looked when lined with Ryukyu limestone, stone walls, and tile roof mansions. So it's really nice that they're trying to keep the when it looked like this. That's cool. You can see the Enkakuji temple where we started right here would have been really enormous. All that was left today that we saw was this here. So inside there would have been all of these that I don't know.
There are a number of temple sites located around different areas. Where we started, actually, there were buildings that were used to control the trade that was going in and out of the castle as well. So more of these areas here.
You can see down to the ponds where we were with the Benzai Tendo. That's a really cool old picture, that one. We should come back and take a few pictures of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's quite cool that we've gone here before they cover it with an entire warehouse, isn't it? So we're standing in what would have been, what did you call it, the Hokuden?
Hokuden, yes.
Hokuden,
just behind
right now.
You can see the concrete foundations left from the previous reconstruction.
Yeah. You're welcome to add in questions at any time that you want to. Feel free.
Actually, now we're just above the gate here. This has been very recently reconstructed. And what's interesting here is you can see the kind of distinctive feature of the tiled roofs in Okinawa. So you find this method of construction on all kinds of buildings, from people's houses up to the largest buildings. You can see tiled roofs on the new university buildings over there. What's really interesting is that in Okinawa, these very heavy tiles would all be cemented together. So effectively, the roof becomes one very heavy unit, and that stops it being blown away in typhoons. So actually, Okinawan buildings are very, very durable, even in the strongest of typhoons. Usually, there's very little damage, very little loss of life, even in the worst typhoons here in Okinawa. Today, of course, many buildings are built of reinforced concrete, but there are still many traditional buildings that survive, built just like this. Essentially, low, very solid timber joists with a very heavy roof on top, and they last for a very, very long time, unless they burn down. That's their one weakness.
So then the question is, if this is the area of the Seiden, would the Shoin be nearby as well?
Shoin.
Don't know what part the Shoin is.
Good question. Yes. The Shoin, yeah, is the backside of the Nanden, right? So that was when we look across the site. We look across here, yeah, where the ramp, in fact, where that bus is, would have been where the Shoin was, and I'm assuming that they will at some point remove that ramp when they finish the heavy construction and rebuild over there.
What is the Shoin?
This was the backside of the. It was essentially a storeroom for the Satsuma clan, for the Japanese forces.
So before, when you could visit the castle before that, it's like the museum area.
That's right. You used to go through that on the museum tour, go around through the Seiden, and then end up coming out to this side. Get a nice view of.
Oh, wow.
Get a nice view of the garden. The route today actually takes us up through the rest of the castle and ends up down in these gardens. What's interesting when we get down there are some natural caves that still remain, built kind of into the base and foundation of the castle.
Yeah, I think it's also like really nice that they're trying to grow a garden of medicines and food that would have actually been used back in the.
Yeah, they've been planting berry bushes. There's a picture here of the site as it was the day after the fire itself. Once these ladies moved out of the way,
We'll just look at the guy with his yellow hat on over there.
Yeah, so before the fire, the Seiden in all its glory and all that remains. You can see the dragon pillars are still standing there, but the whole building was destroyed. Over here, the Nanden we talked about, and over here, over the side.
So this was pretty much the view we had as we walked right in after we got the tickets.
That's right. Yeah.
And here's how it was after fire. Here's how it is supposed to look. You can see again another picture from inside where the ruins were, and it's very interesting that it had burnt down 5 times.
In answer to your earlier question, yeah, showing here right behind the Nanden. We are just about up here.
That's when the castle was the castle, and there's they gave us the same picture, and red is what completely got burnt down, I guess. So it's just you can have a quick look here. These ones. Right, so
while the Seiden building was completely destroyed, one of the interesting things was that it exposed the foundations, the very old foundations which were underneath the Seiden. So bear in mind that this building has been built and rebuilt multiple times, and every time they would rebuild on top of the old ruins, right? And when we go and look inside, we go and look inside this building. This is right in the heart, the center of what was the Seiden Palace. And down there, below ground level, we see some remains of very, very old walls and foundations. This has all been exposed. I guess it's exposed every time that the castle is burnt down. It's burnt down a lot of times. What's really interesting, just to give you a perspective on this, is that I have some friends who were born and grew up in Shuri. Bear in mind that this castle reconstruction was only really completed around the 1990s. It went through from the 1980s to the 1990s. So many of the Shuri residents grew up without Shuri Castle here, or certainly without the palace building being here. After the war, in fact, there was the site was used for different things. It was used for a university for a while, so some of my friends from Shuri, although they were very upset at the loss of the castle, they were kind of like, well, it comes and it goes, it'll be back again, that kind of thing. So
that is because it has been burnt down quite a lot in Castle's usual.
Yep. How are we doing for time?
It's 10:55.
Okay.
So we're basically an hour in.
Okay. So I think what we'll do is make our way through the reconstruction side here, take a little break, sit down and take a few questions. But here we have remnants and remains of some of the decorative features that were on the Seiden. These twisty bits of iron and metal were actually the dragon heads.
See if I can find the original picture to that, because otherwise you're not gonna get it. Here we go. Have a look at these dragons which were on the roof.
Yeah, these are on the crest of the roof, and
this is what unfortunately is left. And I'm not really sure. I mean, do you think they're just here for the sake of being here, or are they actually going to try and use it again?
I doubt that they'll reuse these. I think they'll probably remake them from scratch. What's interesting is that these were also lightning conductors. So, so these were actually used as lightning conductors when they were on the roof as well.
On purpose or not?
On purpose, by design. Yeah.
It's a little bit loud, but you would expect that from a construction site. You can see the steps here, the original steps.
Okay, so
oh, very loud.
to our left here is the gift shop.
But this also used to be the ladies' quarters.
That's right.
And it was not destroyed in the fire either. This one.
Yeah. So now we're going into sort of what would have been the private section of the castle, behind the palace and the Seiden, and the courtyard where the king would receive, visitors in public and in official ceremonies. The section behind the Seiden was pretty much the royal residence, and very much off limits to visitors and to the common people. The king resided back here with his family, with his concubines, with his servants, etc., and with his bodyguards. So yes, this building, which today is a gift shop, was residence of some of the women. There's a bath house and a bath area here behind us, and there were various sort of living quarters that go back as we go actually up to the top of the site, which is the highest point on the back. And we'll go up there so you can get the full view.
Are we going in here?
Well, yeah, let's show them the multimedia. We won't sit and watch. Inside here is a very well done large screen multimedia display, which gives the story of Shuri Castle, the history, but also of the fire and the reconstruction. They also have a VR show that you can enjoy too. That's just in here. We'll just take a peek. We won't stop and watch the whole thing.
We have a question about where did the fires originate from?
Good question. So the fire started in the Seiden.
I can't see in there.
Yeah, the fire started inside the Seiden. The cause of the fire is still ambiguous. One of the official reports said that it might have been an electrical fault, but then later on it turns out that there didn't seem to be any burning around the electrical sockets. The thing that we do know is that there were a lot of people inside the Seiden that night that wouldn't have usually been there because, just like now, they were preparing for the Shuri Festival. And so there were a lot of people, they had a lot of costumes in there, a lot of additional banners and things. A lot of additional highly flammable material was being stored in the Seiden. And there were people in there late at night preparing for the festival the next day. Around 1 a.m. in the morning, a fire broke out. Was it an electrical fault? Did somebody throw a cigarette in the wrong direction? Nobody knows, or nobody really wants to say. And I guess we just have to leave it at that.
But one of the reasons there was so much damage was because the fire trucks could not get in.
Yes,
right?
Well, yeah, there were two reasons.
They could have saved it a bit more.
Absolutely. There were two reasons why they couldn't stop the fire. One is they didn't really have a fire suppression system inside the building. So that was a slight oversight. Largest timber building on the island, no fire suppression system. And the other one, as Becca just said, is there was no way for the fire engine to get inside. The ramp that you saw earlier, was actually built after the fire in order to bring construction vehicles in. So, yeah, it was kind of
they couldn't stop it, really.
Kind of a fire waiting to happen if you want to be a little bit morbid about it. And what was fortunate is that nobody perished, nobody was hurt in the fire, so that was obviously a bonus. But yeah, hopefully when they rebuild the place, they'll put some sprinklers in this time and retain a place for the fire engines to come in as well. Okay, so let's take a look inside here. This is another display about the reconstruction of Shuri Castle. We're not going to be able to talk too much in here, so we'll just kind of walk around and let you take a look at what's inside.
This is actually turned into a gift shop as well. Look, you can buy a bell, your own one, or the real dragons.
Yeah, I see rings as well. That'd be a good thing to have at the dojo entrance. You know, ring the bell when you come to the dojo.
No, you see what happens when we try and have a bell already, and you see they just can't. That's really cool. The dragons and you can get paper crafts. You can rebuild your own one in all different versions of quality here. If we spin around, we have just the regular things you would see: keychains, badges, things to wrap your lunchbox in. Yep, notebooks, little trays, postcards. Do Singapore use the same kanjis as Okinawa would? Like, can these guys read all of this stuff?
Yes, if they're Chinese speakers and they read them like Chinese, they should be able to read most of this. Well, these kanji are, a lot of the kanji are Japanese usage, but yeah, basically should be able to read quite a lot of it.
Who lived in the castle?
In the castle, the king and his immediate family and his bodyguard.
So let's go to a corner. They're waking up now. It's great.
Let's have a look at this board over here. Not to go into all of the detail, but a lot of these little details turn out to be very significant. So, for example, these are the dragon heads that are on the crest of the roof that we saw the remains of earlier on. The orientation of those, whether they faced in or they faced out, whether they were facing towards China or facing another direction. All of this was significant. One of the criticisms of the previous reconstruction was that they got the orientation of the dragon pillars wrong. So the dragon pillars were like looking at each other, and they should have been looking out, for example, according to some Ryukyu historians. So it'll be interesting to see if the reconstruction is slightly different from the previous version. Maybe they changed some of the orientation or some of the details of these things. A lot of it has this, cultural significance or historical significance.
Okay, so we have a few questions. Why is the Shuri Castle design more Chinese than Japanese in influence?
Very good question. Well, as we've said, the major relationship, trade relationship, diplomatic relationship for the Ryukyu Kingdom was with the Chinese mainland, and in fact, the first major migration into Okinawa was essentially a Chinese colony that was established in Kume, an island just down near Naha Port, and those they were called the 36 families, and those 36 families essentially established a very, very rich and both financially rich and culturally rich colony, which became an integral part of civilization here. The wealth and the riches there were really the foundation upon which, and the relationship with China, the foundation upon which all of this was built. For example, the first trading ships that the Okinawans used were not ones that they built themselves, they were ones that were lent to them or gifted to them from the Chinese. So later on, of course, the relationship with Japan, became the dominant relationship. But for many, many centuries, the relationship with China really was the key to Okinawa's prosperity.
Question number 2. How much did the burning of Shuri Castle affect the tourism, and to what extent is Okinawa's tourist industries affected by the pandemic in general?
Oh, it's been massively impacted. Essentially, since Japan closed its borders to tourism back in, when was it? March of 2020.
2020.
Yeah. I mean, so international tourism obviously pretty much stopped. Okinawa had been going through a boom in tourism from its Asian neighbors, from China, Singapore, Korea, Taiwan, etc., and that almost pretty much stopped. So yes, it's been very, very hard. The place has gone very, very quiet. But not completely dead. I mean, essentially, mainland Japanese tourists have come back to Okinawa. Of course, not being able to go to many other countries. So it's kind of been sort of a time warp in a way, right? So right now, Okinawa feels like it was 10 or 15 years ago when I first came here, when it was pretty much just a destination for Japanese tourists and visitors. You didn't see many international tourists at all. But hopefully, we hope at the end of this year, international travel will become possible again. Or tourist travel possible into Japan easily, and I'm sure it will go back to as it was. But yeah, the impact. When we talk about Shuri itself, Shuri is probably the number one tourist destination or attraction in Okinawa.
But I think like if it hadn't burnt down and it would have only been COVID, it would have been in a way worse position. Like when it burnt down, everybody donated. Like all around the world, like everybody wanted to rebuild Shuri Castle, so they got more than they needed.
Yeah, the outpouring of support and financial donation support for the reconstruction was enormous. Not just from the Okinawan communities around the world, and there were a lot around the world, but lots of other people, lots of people we know who just love visiting Okinawa, feel very connected to it, karate people, all kinds of people. And so,
the Okinawa government,
the Japanese government also pledged to pay for the restoration as well. Actually,
but then also didn't Taiwan and Korea and the other surrounding countries that it was kind of built with and designed sort of by also offered support to help rebuild it? So
yes, they did. Yeah. So actually, in a way, a tremendous kind of war chest has been accumulated for the reconstruction. But it just goes to show the depth of feeling and affection that a lot of people have for Okinawa and for Shuri, not just Okinawan people, but many other people too. So this video is on a loop here. I don't know if we'll get back. There was a scene here of the actual fire itself. So here you can see a visual shot of the whole site immediately after the devastation of fire.
So I think to kind of finish that question, the burning of the castle is not necessarily, it's affected the tourism, but it's not necessarily been a bad for the castle.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The pandemic in Okinawa has closed a lot of small businesses, but everyone's doing their best, and it probably all bounce back.
I would say the pandemic had was a much harder hit on tourism in general here than just the burning down of the castle. So the site remains a very popular site. There's much more on the site than just the castle. This is just a section of a very large, full of very interesting historical things to see and things to do. So yeah, we just need to get back to post COVID world.
One more question.
Yep.
Why is the castle red, and is there a significance to it?
Yeah. So the red color of the tiles is due to the iron-rich clay in Okinawa. Particularly the northern part of the island has very iron-rich clay, which translates into the red tiles. When they're fired, they turn red, they oxidize. So that's kind of the traditional color, based on the geology here, really. But red also, then the lacquerware became a traditional sort of heavily used color in decoration as well. You can find lacquerware that's gold, that's black, that's different colors, but obviously this red pigment, like the color that was used.
But it was also influenced by sort of the Chinese designs from what they'd seen when they'd gone.
Yeah. So making tiles, making lacquerware, etc., all came from China, right? We came with the colonists that came from China.
Right, should we move on?
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to make it up to the walls at the back of the castle site. This is actually the eastern edge of the castle site. We're going to the Agari no Azana, which means the eastern observation point. So over here we have a citrus tree planted recently. This is kunibu. So kunibu are a type of citrus that grows up mainly in the north of Okinawa. These are actually one of the varieties of oranges that are used to make the sweets that we looked at when we were down at the tea house. And the other thing we have here is the sotetsu, tree fern, right? So the sotetsu grows all over Okinawa, and you wouldn't think it, but it's actually edible. It's poisonous. I don't know in Singapore if you probably have the same plant, but whether anybody considers eating it or not, I'm not sure. In hard times, during the war and after the war, the Okinawans resorted to eat whatever they could find. As we said, the island was devastated. The southern island was devastated. Nothing was growing. The animals had probably been killed. In order to starve off, dying from starvation, they would actually take the sotetsu, cut it, and take the pulp from the core. It's poisonous, but what they would do is boil it, try and boil the poison out, be left with the white pulp, dry it, pound it up into a kind of flour, and use that to make cookies or bread or eat. But it tastes terrible, and I can tell you that. I haven't eaten it myself, but we have friends here, seniors here in Okinawa, who lived through that period and remember this very clearly, that at points all they had to eat was the sotetsu, the tree fern flower, and they really didn't like it. But desperate times sometimes for them.
There would have been, oh, that's interesting. There would have been a water reservoir right here. Used to store the rainwater, so I guess the king wouldn't have to go too far to get water for his bath, or for his drink, or whatever he's going to use it for.
Yes, we're really up into sort of the private areas of the castle now. Actually, this wasn't open until fairly recently. This whole area, you could.
Yeah. Until after the castle had burnt down, they'd kind of kept all of this closed off. So again, it's almost another lucky reason. So isn't here really interesting, because this is where the king, after he died, would have been put.
This is where when the king passed away, his body was interred for several days here, and kind of, was very much an off-limits location. It says that this is the Hakugimon, and gate dedicated to the king and the court ladies who would visit. Other people would go through the side gate, and as we said, when the king had died, his body would be here for a few days before moving on to the next location, being cremated and interred in the royal tomb.
It's interesting just how thick the doors and the walls and the
last time we were here with our very senior Okinawan karate sensei and historian, he said that when he came into this area, he didn't feel too comfortable. It was almost like the spirits of the dead were still here. He didn't want to stick around in this area for very long. Okinawans are very how can I say, spiritual, but also, how can I say, they're very kind of scared of the spirits or respectful of the spirits. So. Okay, so we've got one more climb to get up to the Agari no Hazana, the Eastern Observation Deck. Konnichiwa. Konnichiwa.
There's a good question about where we just were at. Seeing as the funeral ground was so large, was there a chance that Okinawans had a habit of burying objects or other items with them?
Yes, they did. So they didn't. What's interesting to note is they didn't bury their dead. They would cremate them and put them in the remains in a pot and put it into a tomb. So yes, in the tomb, along some family items too. There are certainly stories of and evidence that because they did that, tombs were later broken into and robbed for valuables. So there's a certain amount of that. Not a huge amount, but to a certain extent.
So then, is there any reason why the castle walls are relatively low compared to castles of those in Europe, for example? Were they not expecting invasions? Something similar to
the castle, in terms of it being an actual active defensive structure, once Okinawa had been unified and got past its sort of pre-unification stage, when it was essentially small bands or groups, tribes fighting with each other, then actually sort of castle walls became less relevant, right? When they started to get into the age of firearms, so cannon, etc. The castle became more of a symbol of authority as opposed to an actual, scene of battle or defensive battle. Evidence of that is when the Satsuma clan came down in 1609, and they arrived right up in the north of the island. They pretty quickly moved down, conquering castle site after castle site. the record is that they faced no significant resistance. So by the time that they got down here, we'd probably say that the castle, in terms of its defences, was not as indefensible, or not as strong as it might have been. The main thing what's interesting is that one of the main reasons that power was consolidated in Shuri was to try to get before power was consolidated here for some time after, there was rampant piracy going on. Lots of based out of different locations, of course, on this island. The other islands, you can see over there in the mist, a few kilometers offshore. Lots and lots of little islands, lots of strongholds. The consolidation of power here was really about suppressing all the piracy so that the trade more safely and securely from China, from Japan, and places like that.
All right, should we head to the viewpoint?
Okay, so we're looking from the eastern point back across the central part of the castle site. You can see that the Seiden will be located right in the center of view there. And if you look further, you can see right down to Naha City, down below us, and Naha Port, and even across to the islands that are located over there. If you ever come to Okinawa, actually, those islands are a lovely day trip destination. Absolutely beautiful sea out there. Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Hold on a sec. No other questions yet. It's about 11:20, and we have maybe 15, 20 more minutes, I'd say.
Yeah, please ask me some questions. It doesn't have to just be about Shuri Castle. About life here in Okinawa. I'm very happy to answer that for you. Yes, that's a good point about the castle. You see that you're right. It doesn't have any features designed for archer defense or cannon mounting or anything like that. So you can kind of tell that it may have been. Bear in mind that what you see today has been reconstructed, right? So it's not. It may have been that in previous iterations of the castle there were more explicit defensive structures, but so it may have been in the past that there were more defensive structures, but certainly in this reconstruction today, there's no evidence of that. I wonder also if this ties into sort of let's say the modern day image that Okinawans like to portray, but also want to believe in, is that Okinawa is very much the land of peace and good manners and friendship. I know that is very much the case. That's absolutely true. It may have not always been quite the case, though. We talked about how 500, 600 years ago, this was a pretty lawless place. Lots of roving bands of pirates, warlords who were competing for whatever they could get their hands on. So, perhaps the reconstruction of the castle is also, influenced by the image that the Okinawans would like to portray. Yeah, apologies, it's a little bit windy up here, so if that's affecting the sound, we'll try to mask that out a bit. Any other questions, guys? This marksmanship. That's an interesting question. Okay, so what I can say in regards to marksmanship is that one of the things that is not portrayed that much in modern accounts of Okinawan history is the fact that Okinawa was they made a lot of guns in Okinawa, essentially. So the Okinawans, part of their wealth was from making and selling weapons to the Japanese, to the Chinese, to others. So they would take in the knowledge of doing that from the Portuguese and from the Chinese. They had natural resources on the islands to make gunpowder, and actually there was a period of time when they were a supplier of weapons, a major supplier of weapons. So that's an aspect of Okinawan history which tends to be downplayed these days, but that does kind of relate to your marksmanship question. Again, depending on like the history that you read about Japan, the samurai were also heavily investing in firearms as soon as they could get hold of them. From the time of Nobunaga forward, again, the 14th, 15th century, the Japanese were equipping their armies with basic firearms. So although we think of the samurai period as being sort of that golden period, they were very much equipping themselves with as much modern weaponry as they could get as well. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed the tour today. I think it's been fantastic conditions. The weather's been excellent. Hopefully your sound and video quality was good and consistent today. We're very happy to have this opportunity to take you on the tour. We're very happy to do it again. If you can join us again in the future, that would be fantastic. Please follow us on our YouTube channel, Asato Dojo Okinawa, and on Facebook and other places like that too. And if there's anything else you'd like to ask, please ask it now. If not, then we will finish quite soon, I think.
Walk back down to the cave you were telling them about.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Okay, so yeah, let's walk down and then we'll show you the last area, which is in the park.
It's a bit busier down there because they seem to have captured all the children there. But it will give you guys a chance to send through any last questions while we head down there, and then we'll be done for today. Hi. Hi. Interesting door.
So again, one of the most private locations, the ladies' bath.
Do the guys not wash?
Huh?
The guys don't wash?
Maybe that's the king's privilege to have a wash once a year. Alright.
Maybe somebody fell down the stairs. That's all they said today. Is don't be careful of the stairs. This door is that's interesting. The front gate to where the king and his family lived. So he wouldn't have actually come up all of the path that we had taken, where the visitors come up. The king would have come in this gate we just came out of.
His front door. Yeah. Actually, this was an ornamental garden, a garden full of fruits and medicinal plants. There's a large school group here. We'll go past them.
They must have all just been told to shush.
So this is a really interesting feature. We've come down. We're immediately below where we were stood before, up on the observation area. And there are caves here, natural caves. So one of the features of Shuri we talked about from the beginning is that it was riddled with natural caves and tunnels. The Japanese military expanded that, built more for military purposes. But it's also true that the Okinawans from the beginning would have used natural caves for a number of things. Storing goods, but also as tomb sites as well, and interring the remains of their dead. So we have several natural caves here. And there's a little bit of information here about how they've found artifacts and objects within these gamma. These are called gamma in Okinawan caves.
Right, and that was the last of the questions. So
and one of the other things the caves are used for is to age awamori. They put sake in there in ceramic pots and age it for years. It makes it very, very smooth.
We were just right up there.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's it. I think we're good to finish.
Okay, guys, hope you enjoyed the tour today. It's been our pleasure to take you around Shuri Castle grounds and the immediate area. We will share the recording of this with your group afterwards as well. And if you'd like to join us again for another tour in Okinawa, a different location, we'd be very happy to take you on that. So hope to see you again. Take care of yourselves. Have a great day.
Or karate. They don't
Oh yeah,
have to
come and train
somewhere.
karate with us too. Online, or come and train with us. We do karate all the time too.
All right, I end it, okay?
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.